Today, on our second class, I'm going to talk about ancient humanism. I'm going to talk about Sophism and Socrates. And in Sophism, we have some parts. We have the masters that are Protagoras, Prodicus, and Gorgias. We have the heuristic, we have the naturalists, and the political sophists. So these are the topics that I'm going to talk about on our second class about ancient humanism. Humanism, because at this point of philosophy, philosophers started to think about not about nature, about things, but about humans, about what is right, what is wrong, what is politically right and wrong too, because they thought that the debate about nature were like done. They couldn't find any other way to understand the nature, so they started to change the topics, and it was very good because we had a wider range of themes on ancient philosophy. And okay, starting with Sophism. Sophism were a movement of philosophers that were teachers of rhetoric. They teach it how to convince, how to persuade people, and how to speak beautifully, how to make good arguments, and to prove a point. And in general, the sophists have lots of dissatisfaction with morals. In general, they are relativists. They do not think that a group of values is valid for everyone in all places in all the universe. They think that most of things are relative, depends of the context, but I'm going to talk about it later. So in general, they don't have a lot of satisfaction with moral. That an interesting fact is that their classes were paid; they were not free, and this were like a big problem to the philosophers at that time. Socrates, for an example, said that this was an absurd, you know, putting a price in knowledge, but sophists didn't have these moral this commitment with morals. And then, as I said, we have four groups of sophists. We have the masters, we have the heuristic, political sophists, and naturalists. The masters were the most philosophical, I can say that, the most philosophical group, the one that gave the structure, the base to the sophist theories. The heuristic thought a lot about rhetoric, a lot about how to speak in a beautiful way. They used rhetoric a lot in the debates on Greek democracy, since on Greek democracy, the citizens went to agoras and discussed it and debated. So all the citizens, that were not all people, but all citizens, had this right to express their opinions and to decide the things. So that were very useful for them to understand rhetoric, and heuristic developed it. Then we have the political sophists that analyzes power, analyzes domination, and how it happens on all types of societies. And we have naturalists that are this is I'm sorry. This is confusing because when we talk about ancient naturalism, we talk about other group, but the sophist naturalists are are philosophers that thought about law, about natural and positive law, and because of that they're called naturalists because they said that natural laws are more important than human laws. But I'm gonna get there later. First, we're going to talk about Protagoras and Prodicus here. The most famous sophist is Protagoras. all his philosophy is based on the phrase that if you understand, you can almost understand everything. The phrase that man is the measure of all things. Saying that, he means that if I look to the sun and to earth, and I say that sun is smaller than earth, then sun is smaller than earth for me. Correct. If a scientist looks to the sun, looks carefully with calculus, with math, with instruments, and conclude that sun is bigger than earth, then sun is bigger than earth for the scientist. And Pythagoras is going to say that we cannot go anything beyond that. There is no reason to think about a reality that is the same for everyone, and that when this reality is truth and all the rest is false, and then one opinion is truth and other opinion can be false depending on if it is the same as reality. Protagoras will say that this does not make sense. We need to stay just in this opinion sphere, in this area of knowledge that we say, oh, for this person it is this, for this person it is that, and that's it. There's not a better or worse version because all of them are truths. Actually, it is truth that for me the sun is smaller than earth, and it is truth that for the scientists the sun is bigger than earth. So truth, it does not stop being truth, but it's a relative truth. You know, for Protagoras, truth is relative, and then he is a relativist. He says that the man is the measure of truth. So the truth has something that measures it. The truth depends of something, depends of man. Okay, understanding that, we can understand why he liked rhetoric, politics, for an example, because in democracy, the opinion of men decide the things. So it's a good system because if man is the measure of things, man should be the measure of the decisions too. Not the best decision needs to be the one that we should do. There's no best decision. There's no, absolute criteria that judges all opinions. There's just the truth of each one. And in a society, we need to put in practice the truth of all of the majority. And then this is the rhetorics rule that I put in the 1.4. The rhetorics rule is to persuade someone and to make his opinion different. So doing rhetoric, you're actually changing things, because if man is the measure of things and you're changing the man's view of something, you're changing this something, because we are the thing that measures truth. And convincing someone and persuading someone for him is the same thing, for Socrates or for any traditional philosopher. Actually, it would be an absurd. You are convincing someone of something that is wrong, or you are, oh, I'm sorry. By persuading someone, you're not, this person is not understanding, this person is just following what you're saying because of emotions and because of a good rhetoric, not because what you're saying is truth. But for protagonists and for the sophists, they don't care about it. For them, there is no better and worse belief. There's just the belief that people have and the belief that people don't have. So the belief that people have is the truth for the people. I hope it is clear, because it is very easy to understand Protagoras as someone very stupid or very obvious. If you understand him just as, oh, we need to respect opinions, then it is obvious. It is clear. He will not even be a philosopher. But if you understand him as, oh, this guy's crazy, he's saying that anything is true, you actually, that's not just true with Protagoras, in my opinion. Now I'm talking about my opinion. because it is an interesting reflection about truth, and it's very important for history of philosophy, and it's very intelligent too to think in this way, to question the truth. And this question of truth is very productive for philosophy in general. So going back to the class, Protagoras talks about utility and uselessness too. He states that there is no good and bad thing, like no absolute good and absolute bad, because there's no absolute truth. So that can be absolute nothing, you know? Anything can be absolute if truth is not absolute. But he says that there are useful things and useless. For an example, for me, recording this class is useful because I'm fixing the content, I'm fixing my studies, telling people what are, I'm showing people something that I like, that is philosophy. And so for me, it's very useful. I like doing it and all this stuff. And killing someone for me is absolutely useless because I'll probably get trauma. I'll probably get a trauma when killing someone. I'm probably getting other traumas in jail. I'm probably feeling very unpleasant in jail. I'll not see my friends. I'll not see my family. So it's absolutely useless for me killing someone. And I should do the things that are useful for me. And Protagoras does not think that it means that the existence of absolute truth. They say that it's perfectly possible to have no absolute truth and to have useful things for each people. There are some people that disagrees, that they say that Protagoras is just putting another name for the things that are absolutely good and saying that it's useful. But yeah, that's the discussion about that. And that's probably the concept in Protagoras that is most confusing. And as I read in the book also says that this concept is problematic and it's very disagreeable, because it really seems that he just changes the name between good and useful and bad and useless. But okay, if we gotta get a lot on this sphere, we are going to start criticizing Protagoras, and that's not the objective. As I said in the class zero, we want to be impartial here. So yeah, that's what he says. He says that we're not talking about good things, we're talking about useful things. Now, next sophist master is Prodicus. Prodicus talks about synonymy. That is not very philosophical thing, but it was very important for his classes and for rhetoric. Synonymy is the study of synonyms and how they are different from each other. As an example that I think is very clear is weird and unique. Basically, weird is someone that is very different from others, and unique, someone that is very different from others. But unique is in a good way, and weird is in a bad way. So it's clearly they're clearly different words with different meanings, but they are still have the same definition. So Prodicus studied that and studied synonymy by understanding what are the synonyms that we need to use for each thing that we want to express. I think now you can see the use of that in rhetoric. You don't want to call to say that someone is weird when you want to say that someone is unique. And with less obvious synonyms, it is done a lot. You can express yourself very badly if you do this kind of stuff. And then the second topic that I put about Protagoras, that is more a philosophical topic, is the conception of gods as useful men. The sophists in general did not believe in gods, or at least they did not believe rationally in gods. They said that rationally it does not make sense to think about them. That's perfectly understandable because they say that there's no absolute truth, so there's no absolute good, so there cannot be a being that is absolutely good if absolute goodness does not exist. So they say that people create this image of God as a useful man. They think about other things that they think are useful for them, and then they put it on this image, on this stereotype, not a stereotype, but on this idealization of something that is pure utility. And this is what they call gods. So that's how Prodigus says, that's what Prodigus thought about the concept of God in society. Yeah. Now we got the third master, the third sophist that we're analyzing, and this one is Gorgias. And Gorgias is a nihilist, but saying that he is nihilist is an anachronism because at his time the name nihilism didn't existed. Nihilism is a word that comes from Latin, and I hope you know that Latin didn't existed in ancient Greece. So anyone were a nihilist, but in general, thinking about Gorgias with our eyes of today, he's certainly nihilist. He says that anything at all, that anything matters and anything has any type of sense, and all the studies are useful. All the studies that pretend achieving knowledge are useless, in as Gorgias says. So Gorgias starts saying that the being does not exist because it creates a lot of contradictions. Here he's talking about Parmenides and the Eleatus and their conclusions about the being. Parmenides just talked about the concept of existence, just talked about the existence on itself, and he concludes completely absurd, completely not illogical, but completely strange and bad conclusions, bad theories, theories that we cannot apply and we cannot understand that that's truth. Gorgias is going to say we're not capable of believing on what Parmenides says. He concludes things that are not trustable because it's completely different from what we see on life. The classic debate about Parmenides that we saw on last class. I'm not going to take a lot of time on it. But yeah, he says that Parmenides concludes this very different conclusion and strange conclusion about the being, and he says, "Oh, this is the logical conclusion. Let's follow this." Gorgias agrees with this conclusion, but he says, "As we got a conclusion as strange as this one, we need to say that the being does not exist, that nothing exists. We need to accept the illogical conclusion because the logical conclusion is completely unbelievable." And then he says that even if you argue that it exists, we could not know it, since we can think about things that does not exist. Let me explain that. We can perfectly believe on things that are false. And there can be truths, there can be real things. Not talking about the meaning, more flat meaning of truth and reality. Saying like truth as we say in day to day life. For this example that I'm going to give. Now I'm giving an example. So I can use these terms with less criteria. Now, coming back to the example, we can perfectly think about things that are not in reality, as we think on unicorns. And there can be things on reality that we don't think about them. Like anyone is thinking about the the things that are in the back of my computer, because anyone is looking at them, anyone cares about them. Now that I said, maybe someone cares, maybe someone is thinking on what he thinks that it is here. But it's perfectly possible that things on reality are not the things that we don't see, we think, not the things that we believe. So our beliefs and reality, there's any reason, Gorgeous is gonna say, that there's any reason for us to think that they have anything in similar. And then he says, oh, if it exists, we don't have any reason to think that we could know it, that our belief is going to be the same as truth, as the reality, because we don't have any connection between them. We can think on things that do not exist. There can be things that exist and we do not think about them. So why would we uh, deceive ourselves by saying that we could know the being? We couldn't. And in the third topic, he says that even if we could know it, even if it existed, even if I'm wrong in all these other two arguments, we could not communicate the being. We could not communicate about things. Since there is no reason to think that words actually can express something beyond themselves. If I ask you, if I ask you to define yellow and to express in a complete way what is yellow, you could never explain it. Gorgias is going to say that that's because words cannot explain nothing beyond just words. We just say words that are empty, that are vague, and that does not express anything, and we deceive ourselves to suppose that they are expressing something, but at the end we are just saying words that are only words. And the same for all types of communication. When we communicate by sound, as I'm doing right now, I cannot express uh, a feeling, for an example. I can just express sounds. Just explain is simply this sound. Any sound is just itself, any word is just itself, and there's nothing beyond that. So these are the three topics, the three arguments of Gorgias nihilism. The being does not exist. If it existed, we couldn't know it. If it existed and we could know it, we could not communicate it. At last, he talks about the whole of. Oh, I wrote it wrong. Wait a minute. Now I suppose that's correct. I put an H on the slide instead of R, and it was like art's whole, not art's whole. So rhetoric's whole is to deceive and delude as any argument, as any belief. All beliefs are just illusions, but with practical goal. If I want someone to do something for me, I will persuade him, I will use my rhetoric, and he is going to do something for me. It has a practical goal. And in the other hand, we have art that deceives just for fun, just for passing time, just for entertainment, and he makes you think that you are in another reality, makes you think that you're living another thing, deludes you, and actually consciously deludes you. In rhetoric is not conscient, but it deludes you without a practical goal. That's how Gorgias defines art. Art is the way of communicating that deceives without a practical goal, and all the other ways of communicating, all the argument, all the argumentative ways of communicating are deceiving with practical goals. He's going to say that all of them obviously are deceiving because he is completely nihilist and completely nihilist about communication, about language. And then, at last, we have the other movements in Sufism that they are not as important as the masters' theories because they're actually, most of them are not even philosophical. Most of them, no. The eristic Sufism are not philosophical, but the political and natural Sufism for Sufism is. And then, okay, talking about them, we have the eristic Sophists that developed rhetoric and argumentative manipulation, as they didn't care in any way about truth. They didn't care nothing about that. They just they just manipulate arguments, and they change their opinions in the middle of the argumentation, in the middle of the debate, and they do lots of wrong arguments that they suppose that the person is going to believe, because the only thing that they want with this rhetoric is to win the debate, is to persuade the other people, the other person. So that's the main object of heuristic sophism, is these techniques of rhetoric. Then we have political sophists that studied politics. They understood society just as the domination of the strongest group. Now that we understood the masters, it's very clear all the others' conceptions, If there is no truth, is if anything matters, so there's no reason to think about justice or injustice in a society too. There's no reason to think about the will of God. There's no reason to think about good, about evil, and about any absolute criteria that we invented to talk about society. The only thing we have in society are relations, relationships, and lots of them are of domination. The most important are domination. Domination by the strongest group dominating the weakest group. So, and they didn't actually said that this was wrong, that this was a problem. They just said that that's how society works, and it's okay. It's how it is. They do not say that this is bad, this is unjust, because they actually say that there is no bad, there's no injustice. And in this part, you could think that that's a complete absurd. They are just simply saying that it's okay for a group to dominate the other. But here in the introduction to Sufism, I said that they don't like morals, so they does not care about it because their conclusions are immoral, not saying it in a bad way, not saying that they are evil, the sophists are bad, but they just are against moral. They are against what we call good. And then we have naturalists. Naturalists thought about laws, and they said that human laws, the laws that politicians try to use, they are made to fit into natural laws. They say that politicians look at the natural laws and the structure of nature, and they try to assume what are the moral laws that they these natural laws conclude. So they're trying to fit, that's the word, to fit into this group of laws that are already gave to them. And in that sense, if human laws are just attempts to be the same as natural laws, we need to, when we see a human law that is different from a natural law, we need to follow the natural law. And what human laws are different from natural laws? The naturalist sophists are going to say all the laws that treats humans as different, because nature made us almost everyone the same. And in societies, it's very common that because someone was born in a family, or because someone has something or has this other something, they are treated completely different with completely other rights. And they say no, for law, everyone needs to be the same because for natural laws, everyone are the same. Everyone follow the same natural laws. And when I say natural laws, I'm just literally talking about physics, about biology, about nature in the most uh, common way of the word, common meaning of the word. And okay, the naturalists defend an equal society because they defend natural laws instead of positive laws. Oh, it's important to talk about that. I was almost forgetting. Positive laws is a term that is the same as human laws. This term is going to be very important when we talk about modern philosophy, about the politic modern philosophy, but we're going to talk about it later. You don't need to. I'm sorry. You don't need to think about it now. Then at last, he says that the positive laws are similar to opinions and natural laws similar to truths. It's a very good analogy that I thought, and I think it's very clear for us to understand it. That I thought, no, I'm sorry, that the author of the book, the remembering the book that it's everything based on, it's here. If you search in the book, you'll see that I'm almost repeating what they say in my words, but it's almost repeating what they say. And they say that for natural sophists, the positive laws are similar to opinions, and natural laws are similar to truths. When we say talk about opinions and truths, we say that like opinions are trying to be the same as the truth, and the opinions try to fit in the truths and be identical to them. Is the same for natural laws and human laws. And if you follow a human law and because of that stops following a natural law, something that is a conclusion of the natural laws, then you are like following an opinion knowing that it is not truth and it does not make sense. So we need always to follow the conclusions that comes from natural laws and not the conclusions that comes from the human laws. And now the sophists are over. This was Sophism. These were the first philosophers to think about human problems and about politics, ethics, in general. And now we're going to talk about Socrates. Socrates is the biggest philosopher that we saw until now in the course. Is the only one that I got two slides for him. We have Socrates 1 and Socrates 2. In Socrates 1, we're going to talk about the more philosophical theories of Socrates, and in Socrates 2, we're going to talk about the pedagogical theories of Socrates that are important for philosophy too. They have the origin of logic, they have the origin of skepticism, and they are they are very important, trust me. Even if they were not made for being a philosophical theory, in that time things were completely mixed up, you know. The philosophers were the mathematicians, were the physicists, were the politicians, and all the in ancient knowledge, all the areas were together. So we can extract a lot of philosophical background from these pedagogical theories of Socrates. And okay, first things first, historians does not agree about the sources of information about Socrates because in general the most of our theories about what Socrates was are about Plato's notes and Plato's books. And on Plato's books, he often uses Socrates to explain his own theories. Like he puts Socrates as a character on the book that is the pure knowledge, and he is going to say to everyone the truths, but the truths for Plato. not the truths for Socrates. So the sources about Socrates are not trustable at all. And there are even people that say that he didn't exist. All we have about Socrates are Plato's theories about things that he put it in this fictional character that is Socrates. But in general, people agree that Socrates existed and that Socrates had his own theories. And so, as I said in the class zero, we are following Giovanni Reali's conception, and he is certainly one of the biggest authorities nowadays on this topic of Plato, of Socrates, of Aristotle. So we can trust him, I suppose. So I'm gonna say the theories that Giovanni Reali's thinks that are from Socrates, and these are trustable thoughts. The beliefs of one of the great historians of philosophy is a trustable belief, I suppose. But I cannot prove it. We're gonna stay with the argument of authority to this topic in specific. Okay, now let's go to the actual Socrates metaphysical theories. Okay, I'm back. I just lighted this light and got some water for me because I forgot. And talking too much, uh, need some water. Okay, on Socrates metaphysics, there are mostly metaphysics about humans, since he is a humanist. We are in the class of ancient humanism. So he says that a person's identity, the essence of a person, is its psyche or soul, the translation from Greek. When Socrates talks about soul, it's not about a religious thing, it's about like the thing that moves our body, the thing that we use to reason, to think, and yeah, the soul as the same as we could say mind or something like that. But the correct word is the word in Greek, psyche, that is this thing that is not body that moves the body. And the argument for him to say that soul is the identity of the person is very simple. It's just that we do not identify ourselves with our body. Like when we say that something is going to, if we cut our hand and someone punches our hand, we're not gonna say, "Oh, you're making harm to my hand," or "You're making harm to me." We're going to say, "Oh, you're making harm to this other object that is not me." And it's the same for all parts of our bodies, Socrates would say. Socrates will say that the body is the thing that we use to to move. It's the object that we have, the tool that we have to do things, but not actually us. The the I, the thing that we call ourselves, are not our bodies. The thing that we call ourselves are our minds, our rationality, our knowledge, our traits. These are the things that we understand as ourself, as that I understand as myself, that you understand as yourself. So human arete, human virtue, is for Socrates knowledge. Socrates says that knowledge is the only virtue, and the opposite of knowledge is the only vice. Why do I say opposite of knowledge? Because there's not actually a good translation for the word that he uses for the opposite of knowledge. So I think it's good for us to say just not knowing. Not knowing is the biggest vice, or knowing wrong things. That is actually not knowing. So, yeah, okay. Knowing is the only virtue, and not knowing the only vice. Why does he say that? He says it because virtue for Socrates is something that is what makes something a good something. As an example, the virtue of a cup is the capability of it to storage water and how it is practical to drink on it. You know, if this cup were too small, it would be a bad cup because it would not uh, it would not be capable of storing lots of water. But if it were too big, it would be certainly a bad cup because it was not going to be practical drinking on that. So this is in a good size, so it's a virtuous cup. If it had a hole down here, it would not be a virtuous cup. So it's in this sense that Socrates talks about virtue. It's not virtue as the thing that is morally right. No, it's virtue as the thing that makes a person a good person, a person that is good at being a person. And for Socrates, that's rationality, because the person is his soul. So a good person could never be, a virtue can never be a physical trait, or a good person cannot be someone that is healthy, for an example, because healthy is something related to the body, you know, and the person is not his body, the person is his soul. And the characteristic of human soul that is more human is rationality for Socrates. We have other animals, but the other animals are not capable of human reasoning in this level that we are capable of. So it's very, we can understand why Socrates thought that rationality is the human virtue, because it's the thing that humans, in comparison to other things and animals, do better. And it's in for Socrates, that's why humans exist. Virtue in for Socrates is the reason for it to exist. And the reason for humans to exist could just be rationality. That's the thing that we are good in. So using our rationality in a good way is the only virtue. And using rationality in a good way is the same as knowledge. At least for Socrates, knowledge is the outcome of rationality. And because of that, I put radical rationalism, because Socrates says that the only good thing that a human can do is being rational. You know, he does not see any type of virtue in an action that is not rational. And because of that, he is a radical rationalist. In addition, being controlled by your own rationality is the same as freedom, the same as goodness, the same as happiness. Now I suppose it's clear why, because if you are being controlled by another thing that is not a rationality, you're actually not being controlled by yourself, because as we saw in the second topic, yourself is your rationality. Your rationality is your identity. And if you're being controlled by your body or by another person, you're not being free. So if you take your decisions with emotion, that is something that Socrates would say that comes from the body. You're you're not taking a decision by yourself. You're not being free. Not just that, but as you are taking decisions that are imposed by you and that are not decisions that you wanted, are decisions that your body wanted, you know, the decision for Socrates, the things that your body wants is another thing than the things that you want, because you are not your body. This is the thing that we need to understand best to understand Socrates' philosophy. You are just your soul. Your soul is your identity. So being controlled by other things that is not your rationality, acting not by rationality, is acting bad, is acting is living an unhappy life. And at last, the only thing that matters is the spiritual dimension in all senses. So Socrates is going to say that the physical conditions does not matter. As an example, if I obligate someone physically with a gun, for example, to do what I want, and not convincing him and proving why my the thing I want to do is the best one, if I just obligate someone by violence, I'm not actually I'm not actually changing nothing. I'm not obligating him. I'm just obligating his body. So it does not matter at all for human relations, the physical aspects. We have this example in Plato's book that Socrates were in prison and he could run, he could escape from prison, and he don't want to. He says that he wants to stay in prison and he wants to argue with the people that were arresting him. He wants to argue until they let them out, not just leave the prison with his body. He wanted to leave the prison in the spiritual dimension. I hope it is clear to understand what do I call spiritual dimension. Is not a religious thing. Is just the intellectual, the mind dimension. And it's not actually other dimension. Yeah, it is other dimension, but not in the sense of sci-fi movies, of fantasy dimension. Is other dimension in the sense that is other way of looking at the situation. And this is the way that matters. And at last, we have the teleological argument about the existence of God. That is basically saying that the world has an order, and these ordinated things have to be done by someone because they are intelligent, they are ordinated, they make sense, and as the movements of Earth are intelligent, there need to be an intelligence to guide them. Socrates makes a very good analogy makes a very good analogy when he says that when we look to other person and we see that he takes decisions and he acts with reason, we suppose that there is a, a soul in that body that is moving the body and that is making there is an intelligence that guides it. When we see someone acting, when we see an animal doing something with goals, we say, oh, this animal has an intelligence that is guiding his movements. And the same, for Socrates, the same happens in the universe. We see things happening with order. We see that every time that I let something in the air, it falls. And because of these regularities, all things work together. The birds fly and stay alive, and Earth is in a temperature that life is possible. And all these all these laws, all these natural laws makes everything go right. For Socrates, this is similar to look someone living and doing his things with goals and achieving these goals, and supposing that there is an intelligence that guides his movements. So, but this intelligence that guides the whole universe is God, not another person, right? This argument is very important. It's very relevant for the whole history of philosophy. And the last part of our class is Socratic dialectic. And now the meaning of dialectic is more literal, it's like more obvious, is just a way of dialogue. When a dialogue follows these steps that are in the slides, these three stages, they are dialectical dialogues. If they don't, they're just normal dialogues. So that's Socratic dialectic. It's just a way of dialogue. It's just a type of dialogue. And method of teaching and making the soul better. Socrates, with his method, wanted people to be better people. And as we saw here, the only virtue is rationality. So he wants to have better beliefs. He wants to have beliefs that are more similar to truth, that are more similar to knowledge. And for that, he has this method of talking to people in a way that both of them, Socrates and the other person that he is dialoguing with, both of them can make the soul better, both of them can understand things better. And the first stage, it's very common for people to treat the Socratic method as just two stages, irony and meiotic. But here and in the book that I'm basing to, it brings this third stage as a stage that is before the dialogue, but is the base for the dialogue to exist. So it is essential too. That is the Socratic not knowing. And this is one of the origins of skepticism. Skepticism that we're gonna see better when talking about later philosophers on ancient philosophy. When talking about Piho, when talking about these guys. And what is the Socratic not knowing? Socrates says that just God no, just God, the unique God, the God that is on the teleological argument, and this God is the only one that is capable of knowing. People are not capable of knowing. We cannot completely understand something. We cannot truly grab the meaning of reality. We're just capable of almost knowing, We can just get better and better and better and better and better and understanding better and better until we understand the most that we're capable of, but we never are going to understand something perfectly because we are not perfect at all. So, Socratic not knowing is just the tool for Socrates and for the other person to start searching and to start studying the topic. Yeah, I think I don't need this because it's actually a way of studying, by dialogue, not by reading books as we're used to, but it is a way of studying the Socratic method. And the Socratic method then starts with the Socratic not knowing. Socrates would get nearby someone and say, "Oh, I don't know nothing about that." As an example, you have an artist in street, and Socrates arrives there and says, "Oh, I don't know nothing about art. I can understand art very well," and starts to talk with the artist until he starts asking the artist for his knowledge. You know, asking, "Oh, what is art? What is beauty? How can something be beautiful? Or is art just related to beauty?" And these hard questions that Socrates says that he does not know, because he does not know, as we saw, Socrates believes that anyone is capable of actually knowing. And then the artists of my example are not going to answer the questions correctly or completely, because and Socrates already knew that. It's obviously that if you ask an artist what is art, he's not going to have a perfect answer. You're always going to ask them why, and he's gonna lost himself in his own arguments. And that's the irony step. That's the irony part of Socratic method. You ask the person so much and so much and so much and so much that he says, "Oh, I don't know about it. I don't know what is art. I don't know what is beauty. What is beauty. I don't know if art is related to beauty. I don't know why we have this concept of art as something beautiful. I don't know what I'm talking about. When the person admits that he does not know, we go to the next step. The second step is the name is irony, because Socrates asks, knowing that the person is not going to answer it correctly. It's just for him to recognizes that he does not know. And here we have that famous phrase that Socrates says, that wisdom is understanding that you don't know something. Is from here. It's from this method. And then at last, in some cases, Socrates says that just in some cases we have meiotic. That is when they give birth to better beliefs. But Socrates says that he can just give birth to better beliefs if the soul of the person is pregnant of ideas. And this metaphor means that there are a lot of people that just understands that he does not know, and that's good. That's already an evolution. That's already uh, a good job to understand that you don't know nothing about a topic is better than thinking that you know and not knowing. But in some cases, they can even come with theories and come with more solid concepts and with better beliefs about the topic. In this last stage of both Socrates and the person that he is dialoguing with, trying to develop better beliefs, this stage is meiotic. This stage is not anymore Socrates trying to destroy the person's beliefs, the person's fake beliefs, but it is both acting together to conclude a better belief. And something that I think it's important to talk about at this point is that in these dialogues, in meiotic, for an example, Socrates demonstrates some uses of knowledge, of logic, uses of understanding what is a valid argument, and some concepts about what is contradictory and what is not, what is a good definition, what is a bad definition. But as Socrates does not formalizes it in a theory, he just uses it, and we see that he has some knowledge about logic. Socrates is not considered the creator of logic. The one that created logic were Aristotle. But Socrates already puts the seed of logic on these aspects. And that's it. That was Socrates' theory. That was the whole ancient humanism. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in our next class. Goodbye.